Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on the Sound Matters podcast, which is now our seventh episode. I'm Chris Munro.
And I'm Simon Hayes. We're both production sound mixers. Our guest today is Johnnie Burn. Johnnie won an Academy Award for Zone of Interest, a film that reminded audiences how powerful sound can be. Coming from a commercials and music video background, one of his first short films was the groundbreaking Weekender by director Wiz, featuring indie dance band Flowered Up, a piece that really captured the new rave culture in Britain at the time. He went on to sound design seminal UK commercial Guinness Surfer by Jonathan Glazer, which used the underground club track Fat Planet by Leftfield, which was groundbreaking in mainstream advertising. He broke into the world of feature films with an incredibly creative and immersive soundscape on Glazer's Under the Skin. Johnnie, you're known for your diverse methodology, narrative-driven atmospheric storytelling and collaborative approach with directors. You've been extremely busy recently, designing, editing and mixing films like Begonia, Hamnet and 28 Years Later over the last year in cinema. Welcome to Sound Matters.
Good morning. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Chris. It's a real honour to be here and to be able to talk about stuff. So, wow, I didn't know I'd done all that. I've been busy, haven't I?
So, Johnnie, let me just fill the audience in a bit of background, first of all. What people probably don't know is that you and I grew up in the same neighbourhood in a London suburb, and we've known each other since we were teenagers. Now, when I was messing around with two turntables and a little mixer in my bedroom, I went over to your house one day and I was absolutely stunned. I thought what I was doing was incredibly modern and creative, and I found you with a computer, a sequencer, and I can't remember, maybe an early sampler as well. I feel like you kind of were at the tip of the spear in non-linear sound editing. I've got a feeling that when you arrived in Soho to work in sound post, you were already non-linear, and you were probably forced into the final couple of years of tape-based linear editing. But I certainly think that your background with what you were doing as a teenager, you were one of the first.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did both have a real interest in kind of making music and part of the culture we're in. And I was amazed that I've found a computerized way of making music that meant I didn't actually have to have any musical skills for playing an instrument, but I could use my creativity to still shape what I wanted to do. And yeah, no, I did. I've got a scar right there where I fell on a razor block in my first 2 weeks of my job as a runner in a recording studio in Soho, and that's how I got into it. But yeah, someone left a razor blade upturned in an editing block, and I was walking with a stack of boxes and I slipped and fell. So I do have the kind of the mark of the early days of analog tape, and I did edit tape for about 6 months. But then the company I worked for, the Tape Gallery, which was a commercials audio post house, they bought this thing called a synclavier, and it was what Michael Jackson made Thriller on, and it was the dawn of digital sound editing, and it was an incredible machine. I was so lucky. I was young, and I stayed there every night and every weekend just figuring out how this beast worked. It was really complex, and yeah, that was exactly my gravy. I was fascinated by the possibilities that digital audio could give you. Yeah.
I'm quite interested in the background also of the directors you've worked with. You work with, for instance, Jonathan Glazer, who, we know originally from like music videos, from a music background, and even Yorgos, who was, I think he made films of Greek dancing. So what I think what's kind of interesting is coming from that background, these directors making music videos, it's kind of a bit alien to what we've been used to in film, in that they've had to, the picture cut has followed the sound, in that, they had a soundtrack that the picture had to cut to. Whereas for years we've heard from people like Walter Murch, that the picture, the cut must drive the sound, even from people like Hitchcock. And I think it's kind of quite interesting how the directors you're working with, the sound may be sometimes actually driving the picture. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first time I met Jonathan Glazer was he brought in the video for Uncle Rabbit in the Headlights, which was a guy walking down a tunnel repeatedly being knocked over by a car. But Jonathan Glazer was not afraid of understanding that you can use sound in a way that's contradictory to the picture, and you can create a whole second story that will give the viewer an opportunity to use their brain and have a thought process that gives a result that's different to what you're simply looking at. It's a combination of what you're looking at and what you're hearing. And a lot of people still don't understand, you know, the actual potential of sound. So, yeah, every time I work with, I'm lucky the directors I work with, they always want to spend a period of time, possibly even at script stage, you know, because like good sound design does actually have to start on a page. The word sound has to appear in a script, and it needs to have an adjective before it as well, so it describes what the sound is doing. Otherwise, it's kind of probably not doing much. And you need to kind of weave it in and create, you know, whatever it is you're trying to achieve, the subjectivity or whatever. But yeah, I'm lucky that. But I think also you know, because I began with particularly with Jonathan Glazer, and he was really my film school. You know, I started as a runner. I tried doing a business degree and I failed at doing it. I quit after a term because I realized it was not for me. But yeah, so my film school was just all the many years I spent with Jonathan Glazer, sitting in a room with him telling me, you know, why a shot worked or why he filmed it that way, and then us working out how sound could better tell the story. And then through that, you know, Yorgos Lanthimos came to me because he loved Under the Skin, and he even, the night before they filmed The Lobster, he hired a bus in the hotel we were all in Ireland, and took everyone to the local cinema for a special screening of Under the Skin, and said, "This is the bar. You know, this is what we're trying to achieve, something this good." And Jordan Peele, you know, when I worked on Nope, he, you know, and he's a director that is incredibly interested in sound, and yeah, again, he was a fan of Jonathan Glazer's work as well. So a lot of it comes from working with the man, Mr. Glazer, and how he completely understands the whole power of counter narrative.
As production mixers, I think what kind of interests us then is, so I think it's interesting that you say about it comes from the script stage. So I think of Zone of Interest. Zone of Interest starts with a black screen and we hear the sound. The sound actually starts the film for quite a long time. Now, I'm kind of interested in how much you worked with him on the script stage. I'm guessing, obviously, a lot of this, it appears in the script, that, you know, the garden scene, we're going to hear scenes, you know, sounds from the concentration camp and so on and so forth. But how explicit was that scripted?
Not not very much. It was explicit as an intent from the director. And John, when he gave me the script, he said, "I don't know how we're going to do this," but he said what it doesn't say in the script is that we are going to hear the sounds of the camp, and there were no specific incidences of, you know, a gunshot here or whipping here or whatever. But so he said, read the script, and what you're reading is like a family drama set in a house. But imagine that the whole time you're hearing other stuff. So, and particularly with Jonathan Glazer, the picture edit is another rewrite of the film, because it's, you know, the post period on that film was 1.5 years, and we completely took Tom's incredible production sound, you know, with microphones. Like every ceiling of every room had 4 microphones in it, pointing at, you know, different, I don't know, I mean, it's been discussed, but he did an extraordinary job. And we took all of that sound and made a complete edit and mix of the film, where without any sounds from the camp, but just understanding what the inside of that house was like. And it was only at that point, about 1 year into post-production, that we then took all the other sounds of the horror and started applying those to what we could hear from outside the house, basically. And so in terms of script, you know, the 3.5 minutes of the film saying "use your ears" first at the beginning was actually a result of us understanding that the film kind of needed that indicator at the beginning. And so it didn't appear in the script because it wasn't something that we understood at that point. And yeah, and the specifics of any particular sound hearing from the camp, I think they may, you know, the actual script for the Zone of Interest probably mentioned sound like only a few short number of times, you know. But the whole scene with in the garden with the flowers, those flowers were something that Jonathan filmed himself with the camera on the last day of the shoot. After everyone was wrapping up, he was like, "Oh, I better just film, you know, they look good. I'll pick that up." And so, you know, so that scene was kind of made out of ingredients that were all collected, you know, afterwards.
So that's interesting. And again, from our perspective, you know, the actors I'm sure most people, most of our viewers will have seen Zone of Interest, but the actors completely ignore the sound that are going on. It's like a normal
Mm.
family thing that's going on in the garden, and only as an audience we're aware of it. But
Yeah.
the actors are, so kind of conditioned by playing it. Did Jonathan have any kind of playback there of letting them hear it, or was it a surprise to them that this was going to happen?
So we discussed that a lot, and normally, playback would definitely be the way to do it. And I remember in Under the Skin, I was hiding in a bush in Scotland with a big speaker, and the guy on the bike, the bike guy who's a hard man alien representative, and he's actually Jeremy, who's a world champion motorbike rider, and I played this big dog sound effect, and which was supposed to make him scared, and because that was what the scene required, and it was a surprise to him, and he acted scared, but afterwards he came over and leant into the bush where I was hiding and said, "Do you think that was really going to scare me? You do know what I do for a living, don't you?" I ride bikes at 200 miles an hour, but so yeah, normally John is very into playback, but he decided on this film that um, that we really didn't want anyone to react to anything, and that was the whole point. And the reason why he wanted to do the picture edit and the sound edit and the sound mix of what's happening inside the house, the kind of the family drama, before adding anything afterwards, was simply because he didn't want our process of making the film, of making the way that the performances were constructed in the house. He didn't want us putting on a gunshot or someone screaming in pain to in any way affect the picture edit, because we might inadvertently make it look like they weren't ignoring it, or they were, so so in that instance, no. And to kind of elucidate that point a bit more, what actually he said, it was a bit difficult for him because all the people on set were, particularly the local Polish film crew, didn't understand what he was doing. They were like, "I thought this was a film about Auschwitz. There's a swimming pool here and lovely flowers in the garden, and everyone looks like they're having a good time. When are you going to film the horrible stuff?" And he was like, "Oh, don't worry. Johnny Byrne's going to stick all that bad stuff on, and him and Tarn have a really good plan for how to make this sound pretty extraordinary." So yeah, it was a result of capturing a lot of sounds and putting them in afterwards, but not giving the game away during the filming of it.
Johnny, coming from a commercials background, I think it's fair to say that you work differently. You've got a diverse workflow that is contrary to the traditional feature film sound post workflow.
About that, yeah.
How do you feel that has helped? And what I mean by that is, on a commercial, you're used to basically editing, mixing, thinking about the whole thing, collaborate, doing it all yourself. When you moved into feature films, how did that help you?
Well, it kind of didn't help me because I didn't know any different. I thought that because on a commercial you might have 3 different sets of clients in a day, and one comes in and needs Foley and the other one needs a music edit, and you just do what you've got to do, so you become proficient at all of that, and hopefully quite good. But so when I started the first film I did, the first film I did was actually Birth with Jonathan Glazer, but didn't go terribly well in the end, because I actually, to your point, what happened with Birth was I was on, and about 8 weeks in, I did a temp mix of the film for Barbara Broccoli to watch at Warner Brothers, and I mixed it exactly like a commercial, which was how I knew. And in those days, commercials were get the meters up to 6 ppm, compress the hell out of it, and then that's your mix. And Barbara Broccoli actually stood up 10 minutes into the screening and said, "Who mixed this? This sounds horrible. Stop." And I actually lost my job on the film because of that. And that was to do with my lack of understanding completely of the film workflow. But so what I was really good at was editing sound onto picture, but had no idea how to mix a feature film at all. And it was actually then about 4 years after that, I went back to commercials and licked my wounds and thought, I'm never going to do another film again. They're horrible. People are mean. And John said, oh, I've got another film. It's called Under the Skin. We'll be doing it in about 3 years. Please understand, go and figure out what it is you didn't know, because I'm going to need you on this one. And so I went and I found 3, very low budget films that I hope no one ever watches, and got to understand how to actually kind of put together a feature film. And then Under the Skin was really, as a result of that, it was Jonathan and I trying to figure out how we like to do sound in a film. And it turned out what was really important was having incredibly elaborate production sound, and that's the key, and making sure that the set is such a rich resource, and everything on the set sounds real. And the more real you make the film sound, then the deeper the immersion for the viewer. So why go and try and put sound on afterwards that you're trying to make sound like something when it actually already all kind of exists on the film set? So everything about Under the Skin was, using production sound, which was variable in places, and but me and a team of 4 people, including my dad, wandering around various places in Scotland, Glasgow, forests and woods and everything, and to all the different film locations, and recording as much actual sound, retracing the footsteps of the actors that through the forest, but with a mic down on the twigs, kind of thing, all of that, and then creating a library. And Jonathan and I, about halfway through the picture edit, John came in to me every day, and we spent about 4 hours a day over maybe 6 weeks, just listening to the library and cataloguing stuff and choosing things that we sounded, so that he said, right, those are the bits that you can then go and put on the film, kind of thing. How did it? And then, so now my kind of workflow is very much that I see the whole soundscape of a film as the sound design of a film, and as a sound designer, it's all about how do you use sound on the film and present it in the theatre, and I think it's only that because historically you have to have a different editor, dialogue editor, music editor, Foley person, mixer, and all those things. That's why it's done that way. But you could equally view a film soundscape as just a lot of sound, and whatever it is, how you use it. And so I try and approach it in that. But I work with a team of 6 people who are all incredibly highly skilled and very capable of carrying out the different aspects of some are better at dialogue and some are better at sort of crazy ideas and all of that. So, but yeah, and I also have a workflow that I don't work in Pro Tools and have like 4 different rigs that all meet on the mixing stage to create the mix in that final point of time. I work with the mix more like a sculptor over sort of the months of post production, so that me and my team have one version of software, one project file, and we're all adding into that. And every member of my team works in a kind of mix room environment, with at cinema level, placing all the pieces of sound in and trying to think of the whole thing as a mix as they go. So yeah, so it in answer to your question, Si, it was difficult at first because I didn't really know what I was doing, but now I think I've figured out a good workflow.
But your workflow's still unique, Johnny. It seems to be your workflow, and I've got to say, I think I can hear a Johnnie Burn film, right? They do sound different. So your workflow's technically different, but mentally, creatively, what are you doing that you would say defines your strategy?
So I didn't know, but when I started on Nope, Jordan Peele said to me, he said, I've figured out what it is you do. It's all about subjectivity. I won't try and do his accent anymore, but he said, you're always thinking about a particular character in a scene, and everything you do tends to be painting it not from their point of view as in I'm hearing it as they are, but from their emotional perspective. So whatever particularly resonates with a character walking down the street humming to themselves or whatever, it might be the texture of the feet, or it might be some nostalgic sound that they hear from a distance or whatever, but never. I think it's two things. It's one, it's very realistic set-based documentary sound that would normally be perhaps described as noisy and sort of, discardable, because you would rather have clean, really clean, pristine sound. And I try and use stuff that actually has that is so natural sounding that it makes the viewer believe it more. It has a credibility about it because it's so warts and all. And then try and make that cinematic in some way by using really real sounding sounds to paint the way that a character is thinking, or the story is going, or whatever. I think, yeah, most of all, I'm always looking at a scene and wondering what the scene is trying to do, and how sound can help describe that. And there's often many ways of doing it. And I think, and testament to that is the fact that whenever I start on a new film, for the first month, I'm always getting it completely wrong, which is proof that there are so many ways of doing sound on a film. Like you could paint a scene so many different ways, but in order to get it right, you've got to kind of understand what a film's trying to say, and then what your tools are.
That's really interesting for us. So for us, I think Simon would agree with me. We focus very much on the dialogue. I think we're closest to the actors. Our whole kind of raison d'etre, I guess, is capturing a performance truthfully, and trying to capture, the performance that the actor's giving without influencing it too much, without, but making sure that it's all there. How much of the production sound, when you first start on a film with the production sound, you've got the production sound, how much does the quality of the production sound dictate how you're going to design the sound?
Enormously. I mean, I remember having a discussion with John Glazer halfway through the shoot of something, and me requesting that an extra bit of sound reinforcement was provided to bring the signal to noise ratio down, and the producer was like, "We just can't do it," and I said, "But we have to," and John was like, "Why?" And I said, "Because John, if you, I know what you're like in the picture edit. If the production sound isn't usable, you won't do ADR. You would rather lose the shot completely." And he was like, "Oh yeah, that's true." So the quality of the production sound is crucially important, but also what's really important about that is what what you get with it, all the natural real world sound. So for me, and I guess I've worked on a lot of films that are set not recorded on sound stages. They tend to be real world locations, and so for that, it's crucially important to get something that sounds like it comes from there. And I believe that you can use any sound and still tell the emotional story that you want to do, because if you remove all sound, you kind of feel like you're going into someone's head, and bringing sound back in changes that, but it doesn't necessarily matter what that sound is, it's how you use it.
So one of the things that I think Simon does, as I do, is we very often will run an additional track, because having the benefit of multi-track now. So we'll concentrate very much on the dialogue and try to get that as clean as possible.
I think I might correct you there. Simon doesn't run an additional track.
Exactly.
He runs like 16 different additional tracks. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and trying to keep those separate from the dialogue, trying to isolate those from the dialogue, so that any of these backgrounds you can carry on over the cuts. I mean, is that helpful?
It's incredibly helpful. I mean, it's enormously helpful. It's so helpful. Simon's actually just provided some extraordinarily, best I've ever had production sound on a film that we're working on at the moment with Danny Boyle. My son has his first job in this. He's 19 in this industry. He is now the PFX junior editor on Ink, and he spent the last few weeks going through the sound and labeling all the bits of non-dialogue production sound, and creating a library of bits and pieces that we can use that is all perfect for the film, because it was part of the film. And I think it's for me, that is absolutely gold dust. That's the best possible starting point, and results in me hardly in not needing much of my own material, because everything is there to make the film, because you have such good production sound. And it seems crazy to me that that so many films don't actually record that, and I understand that it's because of the pressures of time and what dictate. But if it is possible to do that, then for me it makes an enormous difference to to the truth of what you're watching, basically, in the final film. Yeah.
And Chris, to speak on that for a second, the film that I've just made with Danny Boyle, Ink, there was lots of scenes which were multi-camera, where we really did rely on lav mics. And of course, when we got in close, we got the booms in, but the wide shots didn't necessarily allow us to get something great on the booms. And so we were concentrating on getting the dialogue, the performance on the lav mics as well as we could. But rather than my boom operators just having a little bit of a rest and getting the clapperboard, I was doing stuff like saying, hey, look, let's go and get an AB stereo Atmos of this at the same time, and really just trying to keep them working, and keep looking at, okay, so if the boom can't get great dialogue here, and I think that there's 7 foot of headroom on the wide shot, there's no point sticking that up there. Even in an auto aligned scenario, it's not going to be useful. Johnny's probably going to use digital reverb on that lav mic, which is and have a halfway house. But let's see if we can do something interesting on the footsteps with AB stereo booms. Let's see if we can do something interesting on the vehicles arriving and going, and just always trying to think, what can I do to smooth this out? Because the thing about lav mics are, they only sound like lav mics when they're completely sterile. If we can have a boom Atmos to lay into them, suddenly it brings them to life, and suddenly that performance is incredibly helped by the incidental sound happening in the scene.
That's absolutely true, and it gives so much opportunity for me when mixing it, to have a bit of lav and but on the front wall of the cinema have reverbs and natural time delays that sound just much better than I could try and recreate afterwards.
How about one of the things that that I'm always working on is intelligibility. It's always quite important for me to work with actors and make sure that that without influencing their performance too much, I'm always sure that I can understand what's being said and that there's intelligibility. And yet, in some of your films, there's an intention for the dialogue not necessarily to be too intelligible. Is there what's your kind of feeling about that?
Um, Mostly it's that, I wouldn't say, I've never worked with Christopher Nolan, but I don't think we're that bad. No, I think there's, I think all the directors I work with tend to really not like doing ADR, and it tends to be one of the first discussion points whenever I meet them is, I really want to avoid doing any technical ADR. So the choice, or part of the answer to that is just people, they would rather, understand that the emotion that you get from watching someone and believing that you're actually hearing them outweighs the benefit of clarity of the odd word, particularly if there might be an instance when it doesn't really matter the information that you're being told, it's more the body language of what's being said. So probably it's that, but yeah, I don't know how to answer that other than oops. What can't you hear?
No, but to kind of to talk a little bit more on that, Johnny. My perspective on that is that when we're in a room full of people talking, you can't hear every conversation perfectly.
No.
You know what I mean? And the thing is, when you loop performances, suddenly you get this clarity, but it's not realistic. It doesn't sound like real world. The person closest to us is intelligible. Perhaps the conversation's a little bit further away, lack that clarity, and that to me that is reality based. And I think that sometimes we chase, or not as an industry, we chase perfect clarity to the detriment of performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. I mean, as you said a few minutes ago, Chris, your primary objective is to get the dialogue as cleanly as possible. But yeah, definitely for someone like me, to add to that, to capture the truth of a scene is equally beneficial, isn't it? Because you're right, Simon. It's about what's happening, and there is sometimes too much importance put on making sure things are extremely pristine, and that might mean something sacrifices.
Something somewhat controversial now is that, we're aware, or I'm aware of, when I see a lot of films now that have had a lot of processing, a lot of dialogue processing done, perhaps for noise reduction or whatever. I find that it seems to lose some of the dynamics. I often feel that the dialogue's a little bit muddy, which sometimes makes it difficult to understand. Have you experienced anything on that?
Yeah, so we're obviously the last. I mean, it's a real point we are in at time. Obviously, like in 2 years ago or whatever it was, the first AI voice processing dialogue cleanup stuff came out, and it's an irresistible button for people to push. But it does, and it does distance you from the actors and from the performance. And in fact, to sort of highlight that point, uh, I did the whole dialogue edit and kind of premix on Hamnet, and I was in the mixing room with Chloe, the director, and we were sort of 3 weeks of mixing, and we were about 3 days in, and I had played her the film before we went into the mix, and and since she'd heard it, I'd pushed the DX revive button, and it removed an awful lot of background noise, and I was like, this is amazing, everything's so clean, and you can hear every twig in the forest now in the background that I put in. But the primary thing that it also removed was quite a bit of the hiss through the center speaker that makes you believe, and that's the fabric of credibility. And it also damages the kind of the Fs and S's, all those high frequency things. But there was I sitting there playing her this thing, kind of enjoying all the like, wow, this is amazingly clean. And she turned around and said, Johnny, have you done something? And I was like, what? And she said, well, I just don't feel as close. I don't understand my film anymore. I just feel removed from it. What's changed? And I sort of went a bit bright red and told her about AI and put with a button I'd pushed. And she was like, yeah, don't do that. And so I undid that button. So yeah, I think the issue that you raised there is incredibly valid. And, because we've spent all of our careers trying to get rid of noise, and then here's this magic box that just does it in a button push. It's too tempting. And a lot of films have had that dial turned all the way up. And I think what we'll see now is that it comes back down. And for anyone listening who wants a tip on that, the best thing I've found is use DX Revive, ban the frequencies, don't touch the high frequencies because that's the bit that really gets destroyed with AI, and hammer away at the bottom stuff.
And one of the things that Chris and I have been speaking about a lot, Johnny, is, for instance, when we're using two booms, and why do we lav everyone, even if they haven't got dialogue? It's because there is life and performance in the reactions, the breaths, the lip smacks, the kind of the little sighs
Totally.
of the person that isn't talking. And what is concerning right now is the amount of noise reduction to get rid of the noisy modern film sets we work on, whether that's from incredibly noisy fan-driven lamps, whether it's because the DP has decided that they want to shoot with a noisy camera, whatever the reason is, doesn't matter. But when we are all, as a sound department, production and post, forced into using noise reduction quite aggressively because of the environment, me and Chris have been talking about, what are we losing? Well, we're not necessarily losing that sausage of dialogue that still exists, right, in Pro Tools. What we're missing is those little bits in between, that reaction, that kind of exhale when someone says something, because of course, as part of that cleanup process, all of that gets removed. And I think that it's something that directors really need to be aware of, that it's not just about the words. And I just think as an industry, we've all got to start talking about this.
Simon, I think your point is incredibly important at this point in time, because our audience is becoming so much more aware of what a sort of ersatz AI driven thing is. The people we're making these films for are now better than ever at telling, not consciously but subconsciously, they switch off when things don't sound real. And the reality is people breathe and do lip smacks, and bumps and crackles happen and all that. And so taking those out, I think really can have an enormously detrimental effect to how someone feels about the film they're watching. It's the difference between, wow, God, I'm really there. I'm with that person. I can hear their breath, or something, I'm switched off from this. There's something missing, kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's hugely important. How do we get that message out?
It's interesting. I often describe that as a viewer being outside the window looking in or actually being in the room.
That's right. Yeah, you
You
put
know,
a
it's actually
barrier
being
up.
in there.
Yeah,
And it's interesting, isn't it? And I think what's really concerning is when we are dealing with noisy lamps, noisy cameras. I think often DPs and directors think, "Oh, this is a problem for the sound," but the post will sort it out. But actually, it's not the sound that they're assaulting; it's actually the performance that they're
yeah.
assaulting.
It's the
You know, it's
film.
actually a problem for the actors.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and actors, you know, if you bring an actor back in to do a whole load of breaths, they would think you were mad. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, all the other, but it's crucially important. Begonia had, you know, we use VistaVision, which you know obviously pulls the cart sideways, so it's noisy, and yeah, it was an extra, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks of sort of sound editing and restoration, and we thought, like, I actually was invited to a camera test, you know, with the actors and Yorgos at Panavision in Burbank, and before shooting began, to see if the technology I had could get rid of the camera noise, you know. So Robbie was like, "Can we shoot with this camera?" And you know, we tested it, and I got my laptop out, and I was like, "Yeah, you know, it's good." And then we got to the film set, and the walls were, instead of being like Panavision 50 feet away, big room, we were in a kitchen cupboards were like 5 feet away, and every surface reflected, and there was about, I don't know, a good few more dB, I don't know what, of camera noise going straight down the microphone. So it became hugely problematic. And the net result was a hell of a lot of restoration work, and much of that was definitely to try and preserve all those little breaths and everything that
So mics are moving around all the time as well. That's the other point. Is when you do a test in a lab, in a room, you know, you put a mic in one place, but of course
yeah,
that isn't how it is on a film set. You know, the mics are moving, the distance from the source change.
yeah.
Even the labs change as they turn heads and
No,
so on.
exactly. It was a camera test, not a sound test, really. Let's be honest.
And you made an interesting point when we were talking in a conversation, Johnny, about how you did that, because I was saying, look, what you did was incredible, and it is absolutely incredible, cleaning up that VistaVision to that extent with, you know, and keeping those original performances is just, I mean, it's mind blowing that it can happen. But what you were talking about is how difficult it gets when an actor gets to the end of their breath at the end of a sentence, because of course they're running out of air, and so suddenly their volume goes down naturally, and that signal to noise starts to diminish against the camera. And so really there isn't such a thing as a free lunch, because if the actor's aware of that, they're going to keep their volume up. So in effect, the camera noise could be dictating performance,
Yeah,
in that the actor feels that they need to speak louder. I'm not sure. Look, I'm obviously against running these noisy cameras. And I'm going to just say it out loud publicly, I don't think that we gain anything extraordinarily visually that you couldn't be achieving on Super 35 film. I'm an absolute film lover. I think film looks outstanding, but I question, when we're talking about various noisy cameras, what we're gaining versus what we're losing. That's just my perspective on it.
yeah. It's a good PR point though, having a VistaVision camera. But yeah, yeah. To be honest, I'm not versed enough in image to see the difference that the pain is caused, for sure.
I wonder if the public are,
I think
if the audiences are.
but yeah, I would imagine they sell more seats because, oh, this is filmed on VistaVision, you know. Not, but I don't know. Do they really? I don't know. But Yorgos loved the camera.
Yeah.
I don't know. But with that, I thought when we tested it, I also said to Yorgos, because of course in Begonia, in that basement, there'll be a noisy fan, and you'll be able to hear the refrigerator on the floor above and all of that. And he was like, yeah, sure. And then when I played him that, he was like, no, take them out. And so we, you know, it ended up being a very quiet environment as well. So the director made it worse by wanting a clean environment.
Yeah.
Talking about quiet environments and just moving on to, it's very interesting how you know, composers, you know, you've worked with Mika Levy on Jonathan's films, and I think really interesting how, again, there was space for your effects, for your voices. That how I was fascinated how the score left space for your work as well. Any kind of thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, a long process of to and fro of finding where things sit. I also I'm also very aware, back to, Simon and I started from into sound through music, right? And so I've always been very aware of the musicality of any sound that I'm playing, and particularly a background traffic atmos or whatever, just a wash of background atmosphere is like a white noise board of, it has every frequency, as you know, but and so I often kind of spike different particular frequencies that will be to do with the score. So my EQ, I might have a really sharp EQ at 440 hertz, which is an A note, because that's the root note of the score, and it just sort of helps everything feel kind of blended all the way through, but using natural sound rather than kind of adding sound design elements or whatever. So it's a lot of what I'll do is try and might make the diegetic sound a little bit abstract as opposed to layering on abstract sound that's different.
So here's a kind of hypothetical question now, because of the fact that you do so much in the sound design, the supervising sound editing, the mixing, there's much. Do you have to have a kind of, very often, you notice that there's sometimes a bit of a fight between composer and sound effects editors trying to see what's going to compete amongst each other. Do you have to kind of fight with yourself?
Yeah, no, I definitely used to. I know that I used to think, gosh, all this wonderful sound has to go in. I think I'm better now at purely trying to think like the filmmaker who happens to be wearing the sound hat and really following what's useful for the film. Yorgos kind of taught me that, because I was very used to whenever I'd work with the director saying, here's three options, or or working on a scene and throwing as much sound in that I thought was really cool or designy or interesting to listen to. And he said to me, stop doing that. Just play me the film when you've finished making it, and you're the sound guy, and you figure out what the film needs. And it forced me to really radically approach how everything that I was doing from a point of view. Oh my God, I have to completely understand the film and what that needs, rather than just what the sound bit is.
How
That's
much has
fascinating, yeah.
how much has Dolby Atmos changed the way you worked?
I think the biggest thing I love about Dolby Atmos is having more than particularly, overhead stuff or any of that dimensional. It's having frequency behind you, having, a broad spectrum of sound, a full bandwidth in the rears and everything, I think is wonderful. And also the ability to more reliably predict how something's going to how you're going to hear it in a movie theaters, being able to confidently pan things around like dialogue, on the front wall, knowing that it's not going to have, all those time delay errors and things like that. So confidence in it's allowed me to be more adventurous in how I would put something together, I would say, for sure. Yeah. But then, Zone of Interest was pretty much a mono film. It did exist as an Atmos mix, and when during the mix process, I had the train going around the back, you'd hear the voices all around us, the dogs barking, everything was very dimensional and spatial. And we were in the mix room for, I don't know, a month or something. And after the first week, John came in the following morning, and I sort of said to him, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I did something last night that was really, really surprising me. And he was like, what? I said, well, but after you left, I just hit the mono button and I listened to the whole film. And he was like, and what did it do? And I said, it made it sound like a document. It just made it sound more like it actually happened, And he was like, oh my God, play it to me. And then he was like, all right, we're doing that. And in the end, it was just, what we ended up with was like a 45-degree narrow stereo across the left, right on all the effects, because I was like, holy shit, don't make me do a mono film. But yeah, so it definitely depends on the material, doesn't it? But I mean, obviously that wasn't that kind of movie that needed to have, bombastic sound. But
Why did you press that button? What made you do that?
out of curiosity, because I was just like, wow, this is. I just thought it was a bit weird that there we were ostensibly having an audience really aware of death and horror, and I just was concerned that things pinging around and everything felt like it was enjoying that aspect of it too much and being
Right.
too showy, And so I thought, what happens if you just simplify it? And I was like, wow. But so yeah, that was a particular case in point. But yeah, to your question, yeah, my God, it allows you to be more accurate with really highly detailed mixing, and confidently try things that are more adventurous without the risk of failure of it, of it sounding wrong. The Hass effect, where a sound, the thing where if you hear a sound's location not by its volume but by where it's but the delay of where it comes from. So if the sound is playing out of the left speaker very loud and the right speaker very quietly, but you're over on the right hand side of the audience, if you're going to hear it first from the right speaker, even though it's much quieter, so you'll believe that the sound comes from there. But with Dolby Atmos, you can, I can know that I can put time delays into things and know that it will all reproduce much more faithfully. So, yeah.
You talk a lot about time delays, Johnny, probably more so than anyone else I've spoken to. Is it a subject that you're very, very keen on? Does it inform your work a lot?
It does, because didn't know I did that, but yeah, because below sort of 30 milliseconds, anything beyond that is you're starting to hear two different sounds. But that really narrow area is an area where the brain is still hearing it as one thing, but you are completely adjusting, the width of a sound, how focused it is in a position on the screen, and so yeah, it's something I play with a lot because just there's a very small area between about 0 and 30 milliseconds where you are. Where you can play a whole bunch of different sounds, but the brain will hear it as one sound, and the really crucial thing about sound is that it goes in your limbic system. You don't process it through your smart bit of your brain. Images go in, and you have a thought about it before you understand what it is. But with sound, it just goes straight in, doesn't it? And so you believe it sort of immediately. So the whole concept of the initial, in the first 2 frames of hearing a sound, your brain is having a reaction to it and taking all the truth and everything it understands from what it's watching from the sound, not the image. That's the bit you're believing, basically. So yeah, time delay and how I think very much of how the first, of the 20, 30 milliseconds after a sound is played, how you're going to react to that, basically.
How much do you talk to a production sound mixer before shooting in pre-production?
Oh, they hate me. No, I mean, I think because I think it's really important to get as much sound from the set as you really can, and I know that the primary goal is to get the dialogue. But as discussed before, there is so much other really, really, really good sound, and I'm lucky that I tend to work with directors who come to me because they are interested in sound and they are aware of the opportunities. It's often the case that I can involve them in a discussion and say, as a sound department, we could really do with the remit to put microphones here, or to deal with the noise issues, but also I want to know if there is a possibility to have someone who's going to have the ability to record all these extra tracks and different background atmospheres and stuff, but in sync with the picture, that's enormous. But if that isn't going to happen, then I'd like to try and do it myself at least, and attend the set maybe on days when the catering trucks are somewhere else, but go and very much record it. So yeah, I'll always very keen to discuss the script and the use of sound, and also because because production sound mixer is on and will have read the script before the thing is filmed, so there's a great opportunity to discuss it with someone and discuss what other ideas could be thrown in that might help narratively use sound in the film.
I think
Something
it's really
that Simon championed was the use of 2 booms, which now lots of us use 2 booms all of the time.
Yeah.
Separating dialogues a lot. Are you aware of when this process is used more, or when there's a single boom? Is that something that you notice?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's huge. It's something I advocate for as well, because it makes an enormous amount of difference. Yeah, to obviously all things like breaths and stuff as well that we mentioned before. But it's just going to give the boom operator a much easier time to follow one person than to try and, because it's a compromise otherwise, isn't it? It's inherently, unless someone's doing a monologue, then a single boom is a compromise situation.
Yeah, I mean, with two cameras now, as we always speak about on this podcast, two cameras and one boom is a recipe for disaster. You're going to have a challenging production soundtrack. Some of it may work, but some of it's going to have to be ADR'd, and it's a shame that not everyone in production understands that. They don't understand what a huge compromise not having that second boom operator is. Even if it's just Johnny, for that collation of off-camera, off-screen dialogue tracks, right, that are just so informative. First of all, it means that you can have an argument and allow the actors to overlap and the whole thing's on mic, right? So again, there's that massive performance benefit of allowing overlaps without any technical constraints whatsoever. That's real. It sounds real. It's human. The second thing is, what you're doing is you're basically, with that second boom, every time someone's shooting a close-up and that second boom's on the offlines, you're getting together a library of alternative takes that could keep the post-production supervisor, the cast, and the sound post team out of ADR. Because you've got that word, you've got that syllable that the cast slammed on, and in the exact same performance and timing as happened on screen, because you've got so many different goes at it. It's just there is just a wealth of performance benefits that I just think as an industry, just producers need to they need to become aware of that, and it's something that I think all of us in post-production and production sound should be championing, and we should be talking about performance, not about sound. We need these booms to capture the performance.
Yeah, and because with two booms you just get so much more material that you simply wouldn't have otherwise, and that's a hard thing for a production to understand. But the net result is you're going to have a kind of a lower noise floor in your end sound collage or whatever. But you're going to have a richer, more believable tapestry. And really, that is something that actually does sell someone a film, is how much they believe what they're watching.
So we're reaching the last kind of 10 minutes, and so if we can just go to a subject that kind of, our first podcast was about 32-bit float. Chris has done a whole movie 32-bit float. I'm playing with it at the moment. I'm doing bits and pieces. In fact, I'm recording a movie right now in tandem, 24-bit on one machine and 32-bit float on the other machine, so I can give the sound post team a choice. What are your experiences? What are your thoughts? What are the benefits? What are the negatives?
I'm massively pro 32-bit. I mean, Hamnet Rashad recorded that in 32-bit, and so it's wonderful, how obviously the headroom is extraordinary, and not having to worry about about mix issues on loud stuff. I guess for me the biggest difference is that the amount you can apply processing is hugely different with 32-bit. So you can get away with a lot more plug-in work using 32-bit than you would otherwise, and you just don't hear the artifacts in the way that you would otherwise. So that's the massive difference for me, is it allows you to get more under the bonnet of a sound, basically.
The other thing we're doing, of course, is we're recording with onboard onboard recorders. So our radio mics are recording directly into native 32-bit float. But basically the sound that we are able to give you is coming just straight from the microphone, very short signal path to the recorder, and it had never been transmitted because they're recorded. So it doesn't have to go from 32-bit float to some kind of package to transmit and then be unpacked. What you're actually getting is like the equivalent of raw files.
I know. I mean, the less processing, the better. Keep that signal chain short, thanks. That's the key to it, isn't it? I mean, that's huge. One of the first films I did with Yorgos boomed, but with what's it called? Instead of wires, transmitters on the boom. So I'm so not production sound ever. And you could tell, occasional RF interference and the bandwidth restriction that gives it and everything. And obviously that's a poor example, but yeah, to have directly recorded 32-bit sound, and because it in 32-bit with that clean signal chain, it can mean that something that previously would have sounded just like background noise, you would then instead hear as a really nice bit of wind, and it has character and detail, and then it can stay in the film because it's not just sort of mush. It's actually something to be shaped and has clarity and detail to it. So please, more films in 32-bit.
I mean, the restriction that we've got right now, Johnny, is that Avid doesn't want to work in 24-bit. And so right now what we're having to do is we're really having to kind of consider both. We're having to, what Chris is doing is providing 32-bit for Sound Post and 24-bit for Avid, and that seems to be the way forward right now. But that's the restriction that we've got. Of course, the picture editing equipment, it hasn't really kept up at this point. Chris, am I right in saying that? Can you run 32-bit in Avid?
You can. The Avid will accept 32-bit float files. However, I'm not sure of the latest version, but I've found that at one point it was actually down-resing it to 16-bit. But it will accept the 32-bit float files. And in a way, I think now also there's new software which you and I are working with, Simon, I know, where we can very easily record on 32-bit float and actually downres it very simply for the Avid. So
Wow.
we could still master in 32, but provide a 24-bit float version for cutting copy, which in a way probably doesn't matter to you, Johnny, because if you have one drive with all of our master raw files on, then conforming to that or conforming to the OMF from the Avid doesn't make very much difference.
Well, it sounds great, actually, because what's going to happen there is, as soon as I've done my conform, I'll then play it to the director, and he'll, without me doing anything, say, wow, it sounds so much better. But it is, it's a shame the Avid won't put that in.
And of course, what we did on Ink, Johnny, which you're in the middle of, is we had a whole load of 1970s vehicles, in different acoustics. So it's not as easy as saying, well, look, let's just go and spend 3 days with the vehicles doing a load of recordings on an airfield somewhere if the vehicles are driving up and down Fleet Street, and their engines are bouncing off the buildings. And so what we did, Chris, was we used 32-bit recorders on the engines and the exhausts of all of the vehicles, so that Johnny could basically rebuild all of those 1970s vehicles, so that you haven't just got that one perspective of the boom with the camera or the AB booms. Of course, we did that as well, the AB booms with the camera, but we've also got onboard recorders, which again is just informing and building that feeling that we're in the 1970s.
It's worked incredibly well. And then, all that material, can't wait to play it to you, actually. So it does sound extraordinary, and it's so good having all that sound from the set, and it's usable because it's 32-bit in a way that otherwise it would have been probably harder for you to manage all those kind of background tracks.
Well, Johnny, look, I'm aware that you're extremely busy. Thank you very much for your time today. It's a real honour to have you on. And, the more that sound production teams can speak to sound post teams, the better. It's just we all collaborate, we all work together, and there needs to be more dialogue.
Yeah, definitely. And more sound effects as well as dialogue.
Yeah.
We've never worked together, Johnny, but I hope we will sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to, Chris. And thank you for having me on your podcast show. It's a real honour to be with you, illustrious men. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers, Johnny.
Cheers, dude. See you.